I've really done a 180 on water soluble paints. I didn't think they were that great, but then I was forced to use them because I was painting at a cafe, and I was really surprised at how much they act like regular oil paints. This Kobe Bryant right here behind me was done with water soluble oil paint. Hi, welcome to Paint Talk, the weekly show where I answer your questions on oil painting. So if you have a question about oil painting, leave it in the comment section of this video and I just might answer it on next week's Paint Talk. If you're new to the channel, my name is Chris Fornatero and I'm here to help simplify oil painting so you can get better faster. Along with these paint talks that come out every Friday, I also do painting video tutorials on my page. But if you want the full version of these painting video tutorials, you can find those on my Patreon page, which is listed in the description below. And if you want to see what I paint on a daily basis, you can follow me on Instagram at Forza43. All right, let's get to your questions. Also, today's video is actually sponsored by Rockstar. If you want to get some very loose, expressive brushwork, down a couple of these bad boys, and boy, oh boy, will your brushwork get loose and sporadic. I'm kidding, they're not a sponsor. I don't have any sponsors. No, I do not. Our first question comes from Luis Dixon. It says, I'm still confused about values. Some art channels recommend narrowing down the values to 4 to 5 for a landscape. I'm guessing this would mean pre-mixing your paints. What are your thoughts on this? I do agree with different values in the landscape. With landscapes, I was just talking to a Patreon student of mine about this yesterday. With landscapes, there's different value planes. So most of the time, the sky is going to be your lightest value, followed by your ground plane, and then these slanted planes like hills or mountains, and then any upright objects like houses, trees, people, stuff like that are going to be your darkest value. A very common mistake that I see people make when painting landscapes, especially if they have clouds in their sky, is they make the clouds way too dark. Even if you have a bunch of dark gray clouds, they're still going to be lighter than, say, your ground plane. Nailing your values is very important with landscapes, and if you want more information on that, I highly suggest picking up Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting. I'll put a link to where you can get that on Amazon below. Another great book on landscape painting is Composition of Outdoor Painting by Edgar Payne. I go to these books a lot. I'll put a link to both of them in the description below. Now to the second part of the question about pre-mixing your colors. You don't have to pre-mix your colors. I do not pre-mix my colors. I do see value in doing that, especially if you're painting in plein air. A lot of plein air painters will pre-mix their colors beforehand. That way they can paint faster because the scene is changing. And for some artists, having the time to look at their colors on their palette next to each other and get the values correct there just saves them more time, and it's easier to dial in the values while you're just mixing paint opposed to nailing the values in the middle of painting. A lot of it's just kind of a preference thing. I don't do that. I might do it in the future, who knows, but do whatever you feel is comfortable for you. All right, next question comes from Debbie Kelly. It says, hi Chris, can you tell us what type of varnish you use? I've been using Gamvar gloss varnish and think it might be too luminous. Honestly, my knowledge of varnishing isn't that deep. I keep it very simple. I just use artist retouch varnish because a lot of times I have to varnish my paintings rather quickly, and you shouldn't use regular varnish on your paintings until they are fully dry, which takes 6, 8, sometimes 12 months to fully dry all the way through. If you try and put regular varnish on paintings that haven't been dried for that long, you run the risk of cracking. So if you want to varnish your paintings once they're dry to the touch, use retouch varnish. And I think they have, different kinds. They have matte, gloss, satin, I don't know. I've only used the gloss kind. If there's other kinds, let me know in the comment section. Now, some tips for when you do varnish. Do it outside. There's a lot of fumes with that. Also, make sure you're doing it in an area where there's not a lot of dust or hair or debris or dirt or anything that's going to get on your painting while the varnish is wet, because it dries pretty quickly. And if stuff dries in there, it's really hard, if not impossible, to get it out, especially hairs. And since hairs can be a pain to get out of your varnish, when you get a brush, make sure it's a good quality brush. Like I use a house painting brush because I want to cover a large area. but I make sure it's a high quality one. I won't use like one of those dollar ones you get at a hardware store. I make sure it's a good quality brush so that the hairs aren't going to come out and get stuck in the painting. Sometimes I have used the sponge brushes. Those work, although when you're done with it, that sponge brush is going to be ruined. But you can get a big pack of sponge brushes for really cheap. And my last little tip with varnishing is if you get varnish on your hands, the best way to get it off is actually to use olive oil. If you try just using soap and water, you'll wash your hands and you'll feel like the stickiness of the varnish on your hands. A little trick is to rub olive oil on your hands and then wash your hands with soap and water to get that off. So that's kind of all I know about varnishing. If anybody else has any good helpful tips or knowledge about varnishing, please leave those comments in the comments section. All right, next question comes from Romel Evans. It says, hey, can you paint over old oil paintings that you never finished after it's completely dry? Of course you can. I do this a lot. A lot of times I'll sand down the painting a bit because I like to use thicker paint and I don't want big, thick bumps of the painting underneath when I'm painting over top of it. So I'll sand down, just get regular sandpaper and sand it down the best you can, and it should be ready to paint over. Now, another reason sanding down the painting is a good idea is because even though that paint is dry to the touch, like we were just talking about with varnishing, if it hasn't been 6 to 8 months, that paint is still changing. It's still technically drying. But if you sand it all off, you don't have to worry about that. Now, a lot of times, even when you do this, there's still kind of like remnants of the painting still on the canvas when you start your new painting over top of it. And for some people, that can kind of mess with you when you're trying to draw and get things right and you're seeing this old painting underneath it. Something to kind of help that is sometimes I'll just put like a wash, like I'll mix like ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, or some kind of neutral wash to tone the canvas, and I'll lay a little bit of that on just to kind of even things out to help my eyes when I'm drawing it. Or I'll just use like a very bright color to draw in my subject. Like I'll just use some cad red. That way it's just easier for my eyes to focus on the new painting I'm working on, not the ghost old painting that's still on the canvas. All right, we have time for one last question. That's going to be Sophia Harvey. Says, what are your thoughts on eco solvents and oil paints? Are there pros and cons of using them? I've seen them here in NZ. I'm guessing that's New Zealand. All right, when she says eco solvents, I'm not quite sure if she just means solvents in general that aren't toxic, or there is this brand on Jerry's Artorama called Eco House that makes solvents, and the Eco House, reading the description on Jerry's Artorama, says that they're not fully non-toxic, but they are a lot less toxic than most solvents. Now, I haven't used that brand in particular, but what I have used is Chelsea Studios paint thinner or solvent, which they say is 100% non-toxic. And my experience using it was great. It seemed just like regular paint thinner. The only negative side effect is that they put like there's like a lavender or an orange smelling one, and I got the lavender one, and boy, oh boy, does it smell like lavender a lot. I mean, I didn't really mind, but I've read some reviews that people didn't like that. Also, it's more expensive than regular solvent, so that's not great. Even though I did enjoy using it and I like to keep the amount of fumes and toxicity of all my materials low in my studio, I never bought it again. I just kept using regular Gamsol. Now, eco-friendly paints, I'm guessing you're talking about water-soluble paint. I think water-soluble paints are great. I've really done a 180 on water-soluble paints. I didn't think they were that great, but then I was forced to use them because I was painting at a cafe and I was really surprised at how much they act like regular oil paints. This Kobe Bryant right here behind me was done with water-soluble oil paint. And I don't even use any of the special mediums for the water-soluble paints. A lot of them, like Cobra and Duo Aqua or Aqua Duo, have like their own mediums that you can get with. I don't even do that. I just use straight water, and results are pretty good. So if you have like allergic reaction to fumes, they mess with your allergies or anything like that, water-soluble paints are great. Water-soluble paints are also good if you're traveling. The water-soluble paints are also good if you're painting on location. I haven't tried that yet, but seems like a good idea because all you need is water. You don't have to have, paint thinner out there. Now, I have used the Duo Aqua water mixable oils, and I've used the Winsor & Newton water mixable oils, and honestly I can't really tell a difference between the two. The Duo Aqua are more expensive, so I've just stuck with the Winsor & Newton. I know there's some people out there that would highly disagree with me, but Just being honest, I can't really tell that big a difference. If anybody watching would like to see me make a whole video on water mixable oils, maybe do a demonstration or just show how I use them, let me know in the comments section. All right, that's it for this week's paint talk. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. You hitting that like button really helps the channel grow, helps other people see these videos. If you want to see what I'm painting on a daily basis, you can follow me on Instagram at Forza43. Full painting video tutorials are on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description below. I am Chris Fornatero here telling you to go get painting. Whoa, you're still here. You made it to the end of the video. That must mean you really like it. In that case, you should hit the subscribe button. You'd also probably like this video too. And this video. Please pick one. All right, this is getting awkward.